Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. The Ferguson riots and the destruction of the business district by fire has caused St. Louis to stop and take notice. Politicians repeatedly say they want us to have a conversation about race issues which caused the explosion of violence. Our conversation today is with Christopher Arps. Mr. Arps is a member of Project 21, an initiative of the National Center of Public Policy Research to promote the views of African Americans whose entrepreneurial spirit, dedication to family, and commitment to individual responsibility has not been represented by the nation's civil rights establishment. He's also a managing partner of NLB Enterprises, a digital media and political consulting firm. Mr. Arps is a co-founder of MoveOnUp.org, an organization with a vision to connect, motivate, and empower Black conservatives to openly participate in the American political process. Christopher Arps knows the realities of the Missouri political process, having been a field representative for U.S. Senator James Talent and a district liaison for State Representative Sherman Parker. So let's have a conversation about race in St. Louis. Christopher Arps, welcome to Conversation.
Lee, great to be with you. I think we have solved the world's problems many times on the phone, and it's great to discuss them here on camera on your show.
I'm glad that you could come and talk about
Thank
this.
you.
I mentioned that you're a Black conservative.
Yes.
You represent a group of Black conservatives. What does that mean to you? Just, because when people use words like liberal,
Right.
conservative, in their minds, they have a vision of what these words mean.
Right.
But they're shorthand for something else, a much longer conversation. So this is your chance. Tell us what it is that a Black conservative is.
Well, in my mind, a Black conservative is someone who believes in the traditional values that African Americans still hold and once held dear. We're not believers in gay marriage. We're for entrepreneurship. We're for conservative, limited government. I think there are millions of African Americans out there that still share those values, and that's kind of the mission of MoveOnUp.org, is to find and organize those folks.
You said millions. There's something on the order, I heard, of 43 million African Americans in the United States. Of that 43 million, how many millions are you thinking?
Well, traditionally, Republicans, before Barack Obama was elected president, usually received 10% of the Black vote. In 2008, when John McCain was on the ballot, he only got 4% of the Black vote, which is horrible. But I looked up the numbers, and that was about 800,000 African Americans who voted for John McCain over the first Black president. So we're looking to try to find and organize those folks. It doesn't always take millions of people to have a successful political movement. If you just look at the homosexual lobby, there's not a great deal of them. But if you look at the power that they've been able to amass over the years with those amount of numbers, it's kind of a impetus or for Move On Up to try to do what we're trying to do.
And what is it you're trying to accomplish?
Well, we're just trying to basically open a dialogue with African Americans to show that you're not alone. I kind of liken it a little bit to when you watch National Geographic programs and you'll see millions of animals migrating, and there always will be one animal that will cross over a river because it doesn't know if there's alligators or something in the water, and then after that happens, all of them come across. And one of the things that I've heard many times since I've started this organization is, thank you for starting it because now I know that I'm not alone. And I think that there are millions of African Americans that realize the Democratic Party has been taking us for granted for all of these years, but they don't want to go out there on their own and feel like they are alone. And that's what we are, basically a support system for them to know that they're not alone and there are others that share their values.
There are two female Black Missouri senators who have had a lot to say, both before the events of August the 9th in Ferguson, and especially since then.
Sure.
Their names are?
Maria Chappelle Nadal, who's actually my state senator and actually a good friend of mine, and Senator Jamila Nasheed.
But they have had much to say, which at times almost seems like they don't believe in the judicial process. It was almost like, hang them, then we'll talk about it.
Right. Well, this has been a very emotional situation with the Michael Brown shooting and with the incident that happened in New York. Emotions are running high. I don't necessarily agree with everything that the senator has said and some of her comments. So I may agree with the one she said about Jay Nixon. She, as you know, she's been
on him.
She's been very hard on Jay Nixon, but some of the other comments.
Well, he's earned the right.
Exactly. So some of her comments I don't necessarily agree with, but I applaud her for being out there and trying to coordinate the community and the young folks and get them involved in political activism.
But what is it that these two women would like these young people to vote for, as opposed to what you believe in?
Well, I think that they want what the Democratic Party stands for, a larger government, victimization, which I don't stand for, and to try to get the young people involved. One of the things in Ferguson that was really shocking when all of this came out is that only 6% of African Americans voted in Ferguson. And I think what she's trying to do is trying to galvanize those people that if you want to see more representation on the police force, if you want to see more representation on the Ferguson City Council, then you have to come out and vote in April to make your voice heard.
I was in Ferguson. I've been in Ferguson several times, and I was there on August the 30th, which was 3 weeks to the day from the shooting of Michael Brown. I was there on a photo trip, and I took a bunch of photos of buildings and of people, especially people. Yeah. But in the background, you could see these signs that were hung up that where they were registering people to vote. And so, as part of my process, I would talk to the people who were sitting there waiting for people to sign up, and it was like, well, how many people signed up to register to vote today?
Yeah.
Like 4, 5, 6.
Right.
And there were huge crowds everywhere, 4, 5, or 6. And so I hear what you're saying, but what is it about young blacks that they don't seem to understand that what you were talking about, which is the way, if you want to change things, it's a slow process, and you have to put people, because this is a representative government, you have to put people into those positions that represent your point of view, and then gradually the laws become the laws that you want.
Right. Well, I think just in general, if you look at young people, besides the Barack Obama era, in the past, traditionally, young people don't come out and vote.
You did.
Well, yeah,
I did.
I did, but
he did.
There was a different system back then, and when I was in school. And one thing about me, I've always been a political junkie since I can remember the Watergate hearings in 1972. I was 6 years old. I didn't really understand what was going on, but I knew it had to be important if they were interrupting soap operas with hearings. So that's kind of always been my thing, is politics. But traditionally, young people aren't engaged. And then when you have young people who are African American who feel right or wrong that the system is against them, I think that's going to make them even more disengaged. So I think that's a big part of it, personally.
Okay, so here we are today. I mean, today is December the 9th, 2014. We have considerable civil disorder in many large cities across the United States. In your opinion, what's it going to take in order to make people feel more comfortable where they don't feel it's necessary to be out in the streets?
Well, I tell you, one thing that I didn't originally support in these particular type of cases was a special prosecutor to come in and investigate police shootings. But I think
you mean specifically the Darren Wilson, or in general?
Just in general. I think that you have a lot of people that are losing confidence in the system and feel that the justice system is rigged against them. You know, we all know from learning in this process that, you know, the prosecuting attorneys work very closely with the police officers, you know, in other cases. And it gives the appearance that prosecuting attorneys don't want to bring cases against a police officer. And I think when you see the case in New York and when you see the case here, people are losing confidence in the system. And I think just to restore that is just have a special prosecutor come in and investigate these cases. I think that's one solution.
I'm not here to defend Bob McCullough. I'm just going to say, I'll bet from his perspective, though, that he feels that he did a good job and that the information which was presented to the grand jury was a thorough job in giving the grand jury all the information. Right or wrong. I mean, there are many, and I've heard them on television saying, like, how dare he give exculpatory testimony to the grand jury? I mean, only give the one side.
Right.
Well, yeah, but of course when you have a howling mob, it might be difficult for Darren Wilson to actually get a fair trial. I mean, I grew up in Cleveland, and there was a...
I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I do too. I mean, the mistake by the lake. Gosh, I'm trying to remember. There was a doctor, a chiropractor, who was accused of murdering his wife. This was the guy who's... You remember the old TV show, The Fugitive?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is sort of like what they based this this on. And the guy was accused of having killed his wife. And the Cleveland press just went after this guy, and you know, howling mobs and all the rest. Finally, he was thrown in jail. And later on, F. Lee Bailey took up the case years later and got a landmark Supreme Court case which says, hey, you're not allowed to use the press to completely create a howling mob. And so then he was retried many years later, and when it was much quieter, then based on the evidence, he was released. Although he'd spent like 10 years or so in prison. And I don't think that society really wants, I mean, if somebody's not guilty of something, to just be in jail in order to satisfy a howling mob.
Well, and I agree with that. You know, personally, to me, in the Eric or the Michael Brown case, you know, once the forensic evidence started coming out, once you had the 3 separate autopsies that disproved the shooting in the back theory,
or he's laying on
the ground. You know, once that came out, you know, it was kind of obvious to me that what we thought happened didn't happen. But I think when you have the Eric Garner case in New York, where a man is seen and he's saying 11 times that he can't breathe, you know, that to me is a case that should go to the grand jury and then let a trial decide if this was a chokehold, was this criminal negligence homicide. You know, I agree with Judge Napolitano on Fox News, who's no liberal, who said that when he viewed that, he felt this was criminal negligent homicide, and the grand jury should have
you don't have to intend to kill somebody when you kill to be guilty of a crime.
And also too, I want to bring that over the weekend. Eric Garner's sister and his wife were on national TV talking about this case. And of course, this doesn't get a lot of publicity because it's not fitting in with the narrative. But they both said that they didn't feel that this was a question of race. They felt it was basically just overzealous police officers. You know, it's ironic to me that, you know, New York a couple of weeks ago decriminalized the possession of marijuana, where, you know, if you get caught with it, you get a ticket. But basically, they bring out the Gestapo
for tobacco.
For a guy selling loose cigarettes. You know, you got to have 5 and 6 people out to arrest this guy and put him in a chokehold.
Well, that's because they're not getting their tax revenue.
Exactly.
These are revenuers, is who these police officers, they've been, I don't think people understand that the mayor has sigged the police on folks who are selling these loose cigarettes because the mayor's not getting the kind of taxes that he wants to get off a cigarette. I think it's like $13 a pack in New York.
And you know, Lee, and that's really kind of the basis of the distrust between the police and African Americans in St. Louis County. You know, as you know, St. Louis County has 94 municipalities. 67 of those municipalities have police officers. There have been cases where up to 80% of a municipality's operating budget comes from tickets.
Yeah.
And I know that you've had an experience with one of these local municipalities and could speak to that these police officers have become tax collectors instead of enforcing serious crimes.
Right. Have you had?
Oh
experience?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Plenty.
So you know what?
Yeah.
You know what's going on.
When
now,
I was growing up, I started driving in 1982, and Ferguson, Jennings, Country Club Hills, there were little municipalities around there that, as a black person, you knew, especially a young black person, that you didn't want to go through those municipalities because you had a very good chance of being stopped and harassed, and you definitely didn't want to go through those municipalities if there were like 3 or 4 of you in one car. You were asking to get pulled over.
Now, this we're going to go into a pretty important part of this discussion. Why do you think that if there's 3 or 4 young black men or boys
Right.
in a car, that what you just said is true? Why are the police thinking that this is an opportunity to really get something?
Well, I think it's racial profiling.
I mean, is it about just giving a ticket, or that the police officer thinks they're doing something?
They're doing something. I mean, that's just always the perception that we had. And, as an African-American young man, all of us got that talk from our parents where, if you get pulled over by a police officer, keep your hands in plain sight. Yes, sir, no, sir, be very polite. And we were also told, if possible, don't ride around with 3 or 4 of you guys in a car because you're going to get pulled over and harassed. I'm a conservative. I don't play the victim. I think some of these words have been thrown around, just to incite. One of them is racial profiling. I think in some cases you have to profile people. That's just part of good crime prevention. But in cases of that where African American men are pulled over, or young boys, just for that, I mean, it's racial profiling.
But here's the real question: of all these stops that happen, how often is it there is something going on, and which reinforces the police's attitude of, yeah, maybe we ought to be stopping these guys.
Yeah, and I think that is a part of it because of what you've seen in the past, where you have a group of young men in the car that maybe are up to no good, but unfortunately it leaves a very bad taste in the mouths of people that aren't doing anything wrong, that are just so happen riding with a bunch of people, and it just gives that bad impression and leaves a bad taste in the mouth of a lot
I
of
know
people.
exactly what, well, no, I shouldn't say I know exactly, but I know what you're talking of, because now if I'm driving on Interstate 170 through certain areas, I've got my cruise control set so that nobody can say that, I'm speeding, so there's any opportunity to be pulled over, even though that's not why I was pulled over. But as a matter of fact, that was so weird. When the time that I was pulled over, sat there for 20 minutes with the police officer trying to get him to explain to me what my offense was.
Yeah. Good luck.
But the offense was, we got you. Pay us money.
And I remember I looked it up. I didn't know it was this long ago, but you remember the case in 2000 when the Belnor Police Department, which they patrol around UMSL, and they had one police officer that when people were coming up to an intersection was manually changing the light to yellow so people would run it, and then once they passed through the intersection, there was a cop up further that would pull them over. I mean,
I just have to make one correction.
Sure.
Bell Ridge.
Bell Ridge.
Yeah.
Well, Belnor, Bell Ridge, they all, they start all running together after
well,
Velda Village, Velda Hills.
It's interesting you mentioned Bell Ridge, because that's the...
Is that where you're...
That was... and I wrote a very, very long piece, which you read, and now is in the hands of Senator Eric Schmidt. What do you think of Senator Schmidt's pre-filed bill to somehow get some control over the amount of revenue which communities are collecting as part of their budget?
Well, and I actually, when I saw that, I thought there was actually, because Representative Conway, Kathy Conway, is a Facebook friend of mine, and she mentioned that she had passed some legislation where they capped it to 30% of what the revenue that you could get from a ticket. And I want to say this also too. You know, a lot of these little small municipalities are predominantly white police officer municipalities that are pulling over 90% of them are black residents. But you're also having the same thing in black municipalities like Pagedale and Pine Lawn. You know, in Pine Lawn, I think they have 5,000 citizens, and the newspaper said that they gave out 15,000 tickets, you know, in one year.
Yeah.
So it's entrapping everybody.
Right.
And you know, I'm not a big believer in consolidation of St. Louis City and St. Louis County, but there has to be something done with these municipalities when, you know, they're getting majority of their tickets from harassing motorists, basically.
Well, in my the events which affected me occurred in April of 2003. Okay. I wrote this document, which was sent to my attorney, but also I released it to the press, and made sure the Post had it, TV had it, radio had it. Nobody, zero, paid any attention to it. Right? Then something else occurred in 2010 that, and I don't remember what that was, and I re-released it again, right? And I even sent it up to that fella Chris Hayes, who's you know, investigative reporter for Fox 2, and nothing, zero, right? Finally, the events of Ferguson happened. I re-release it a third time. Now, all of a sudden, you know, people are putting it on websites and reading it and are appalled by what it was that these folks put me through. And I guess by way of saying, I'm not black, and I was treated pretty lousy. So perhaps it has more to do with the way the police operate or been allowed to operate. I don't know. Maybe I'm off track here, trying to say that it's not race, because it sure can appear to be about race. But it also could appear that because folks who look like you are so often involved in shootings, robbery, etc., that they would confuse them with you.
I think they do. You know, when I was younger and a lot more irresponsible, I used to get tickets all around St. Louis County. I always say I think I've been to every municipal court in St. Louis County. And the one common thread that you see when you go to these places, and they're packed, you've seen them when you're there, 90 to 95% of the people
black faces.
are black faces. Right. And then, you know, it's what a lot of people have called, they end up becoming debtor prisons, because, you know, you get a fine and then it's $300, and then unfortunately someone may miss their court date, and then it's jacked up to $500 or $600, and they have a bench warrant, and then they go to jail, and then they can't bond themselves out, and then they have to stay in jail until the next court date. You know, I've seen it where, you know, people can't afford these tickets, and they're saying, well, how much can you pay this week? You know, okay, well, I need this, but next week bring me this, and it's just, you know, it's just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Now, I have made a proposal years ago. I made proposals to people that you know in the political process when I'm talking about state representatives, state senators, and I said, here's the deal. These communities are playing like they're trying to enforce the law in order to prevent problems on the roads, right? Okay, if they're trying to be good citizens, great. Every dime that these courts collect goes right straight to the Missouri General Fund. And then we'll see whether or not they're actually trying to uphold the law, or if they're in the money-making business. Nobody took me seriously.
Well, I think it's funny that when I think it was City of Charlotte, when they were putting the speed camera up on 170, and they were told that this is a state highway, you can't do that, and they tried to argue this is for safety purposes and all that. And then once...
but they got like 100 feet of the road or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like but it's funny, though, that after some things came out about that, they took those cameras down because they couldn't get the revenue anymore. So it's like, if you really care, if it is really about safety, then keep them up there. Don't take them down when you can't gather revenue anymore.
Well, where are, you know, where I want to know where these guys are when I'm driving on 40. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you know, I'm doing, you know, 55, 60, and two cars come zooming by me, and they're like this, you know, through traffic. I mean, at 80, 85 miles an hour, we're the, well, like they say, never a cop when you need one.
Well, and I think if there is a silver lining to this Michael Brown situation, is the situation that happened to you and many others have started to come to light, and you're starting to see municipal court reform. Instead of, you know, someone that may be in a low economic situation having a $500 or $600 fine, you know, I've heard things where they're saying where pay what you can. It's a sliding scale. You know, if you can afford $150, that's your ticket. You know, there has to be some type of reform. You know, maybe hopefully that will, you know, bring some more confidence back with the public, with these police departments.
We got about 2-3 minutes left here. Is there some subject that we haven't covered that you would like to say for the audience to hear?
Well, I tell you, I'm working on a project with Mr. Dick Bott of Bott Radio Network, one of the premier Christian radio networks in the United States, on a rally or program to bring healing and repentance to the city of Ferguson and the St. Louis area. We've got a very prominent pastor from Dallas, Dr. Tony Evans, that's involved, and we have Aeneas Williams, who is a St. Louis football player, who is now a pastor and who actually has a church in Ferguson.
And makes sense. I've heard this man talk.
I've got a chance to meet him Saturday, and he is an awesome individual, a true man of God, and if he wasn't a football player, he'd be a world-famous evangelist right now. But we're going to be putting that together for the 21st, and we're going to have a group of area pastors just trying to bring calm and healing, and it's black, white, you know, non-denominational, everyone. You know, our region needs healing. You know, we saw the situation in Bosnia and with the Bosnians, and I think St. Louis area is a racial tinderbox right now that we need people to come together.
Do you think that because the weather got cold, that's why things on the street have slowed down? That if it was still August, that we would still see this? Or have people finally vented enough where they don't feel that the need to be out in the street either burning or taunting the police?
I think things have slowed down personally because the National Guard has been here. And I'm really kind of fearful because the governor has announced that they're scaling back the National Guard presence. And, you know, possibly in the next week or two, they could be gone. But I think with what's happening around the country with these other demonstrations, I don't think that they're through. I think once the National Guard is gone, I think we may see trouble back again on the streets.
That's interesting. Well, you know, it is, we are already deep into December. By the time people see this, it's going to be January. Hopefully things will settle down and people will heal. We're out of time. I want to thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate the opportunity.
And I've been speaking with Christopher Arps. He's a very interesting fellow. I hope that you guys took the time to listen to what he had to say and perhaps go to some of those websites that have been listed on the screen. This is going to be uploaded to YouTube, so if you didn't see all of it, just go to YouTube, look up Conversation with Lee Presser and Arps. Thank you very much. Goodbye.